Most of our audience here know Hong Kong as an international financial center, but Hong Kong is also an important trade and innovation hub in the region. Just as our financial market serves as a barometer of the performance of neighboring economies, what goes on in Hong Kong's economy is also a gauge of some important traits affecting the broader region. Our Fireside chat will explore key themes shaping Hong Kong as well as the region's transformation. May we now welcome our moderator, Laura Cha from the Hong Kong Stock Exchange, Victor Fung of Fung Investments, and Joseph Tsai of Alibaba. Thank you, Laura. Over to you.
Good afternoon. Welcome, everyone, and thank you for staying through lunch and to this fireside chat. I'm delighted and very pleased to have two good friends of mine and who are esteemed experts in business, finance, technology, and trends that are shaping the global economy to join us for this fireside chat. They hardly need any introduction, but very briefly, many of us know that Victor is a prominent industrialist who has led successfully one of the world's largest trading companies. And before that, he was a professor at Harvard Business School. This, not too many people know. Joe, at the same time, has been admired for his journey from a lawyer to private equity investor and, of course, co-founding Alibaba. And he is recently known to be a sports investor and is the proud owner of a sports team. So we have heard this morning the different, the global economic landscape in the face of growing populism and political polarization. We are in a world where the economic policies are now very much shaped by geopolitical considerations, competitive rivalry, national security, and the list goes on. And we are in a world where with the incoming Trump administration, I think there will be more uncertainty to our world order. Uncertainties in terms of shifting geopolitical tensions, uncertainties in the sense of more advanced technology, and with the breathtaking development in AI and technology, there will be more variables in the world order. But we know at the same time that, as the title of this year's summit suggests, we have to sail through changes. So a lot of the talk about global economy now have centered on decoupling, deglobalization, and de-risking of supply chain. We will explore, are these really what's happening? And what does that mean for global economy and for Asia's economy and for Hong Kong's role as a center for international finance and trade? So, Victor, with the global supply chain experiencing significant changes due to tensions, due to technology advances, and shifting customer expectations. As a global leader in supply chain management for decades, what challenges have you observed, and what do you foresee the supply chain reconfiguration will mean?
Thank you very much, Laura. First of all, I really like to say how happy I am to be here, see so many friends and familiar faces, and really to thank the HKMA for bringing all of us together. This is absolutely a time of dramatic change for the world supply chains. And to me, the changes in the supply chains really symbolizes the change in the global trade patterns and the global economy. Let me just say that, you know, this one thing you see in the landscape today is really two things that you really must recognize for a global trader. First of all, the geopolitics. It is what it is. You know, we are all working very hard to make it better, But I don't think that many people are thinking that the geopolitics will change, and hopefully it won't change for the worse as we see it today. So that's really one reality that is going to be affecting all of us. The second reality is we all talk a lot about how Asia is going to really be the future, yes, but actually for the global trader, it hasn't happened yet. The consumption around the world is still in the US and in Europe. The last I read is that 46% of global consumption are still in the US and European markets. So if you look at then what's happening in supply chains, the reality is the following. It has always been, for the last 20 years, China was the world's factory, made in China, shipped to America, shipped to Europe. Those are the major principal trade lanes, bar none, right? All the rest dwarfs in relation to these trade lanes. However, with these two realities, it is now very difficult to continue this model. So what is really happening, and happening very fast, and I would say in a dramatic way, is what's the adjustment? Really, what people have been doing now is really taking the components that are still made in China, shipping it to a third country like Vietnam, doing the last stage of assembly, usually the labor-intensive portion, and under strict WTO rules, have enough local content to get a designation made in Vietnam. After you get that designation, then you ship to US and Europe. So we can see that you don't just do this for Vietnam alone, right? You do this for 40 countries in the developing economies. So you can see what's happening now is a total fragmentation of the world supply chains. And really, that is the adjustment that the world is really seeing. Now, on the technology front, Laura, really, the impact of the technology, which has been coming on for a period now, is really enable the supply chains and the manufacturing to be linked much more to the final consumer, what we call end-to-end supply chain. And as the consumer really demands faster and faster response, what you're really seeing is the lead times, the cycle times really shortening. We used to take 6 months from the time a product is conceived to the time the product reaches the consumer. Now it's 4 to 6 weeks or less. So you're really seeing a lot of very maybe small lots, but very fast shipments. And what that really means is that the response time, because of the use of technology, is much, much faster, and you're much more really attuned to the mood of the consumer. And in terms of the global transportation system, there is absolutely a movement towards using air. Because if the consumer wants the product, as Joe knows very well, after ordering in the next 24 hours, 48 hours, you've got to move those products very quickly. So this is really how I see the whole setting of the scene now in the global supply chains and hence the global economy.
Thank you. Joe, Alibaba operates the world's marketplace. And as Victor said, the supply chain has been reconfigured with the technology and so on. It really has moved very fast. And you are also at the forefront of cutting-edge technologies, including AI. So how are you seeing the changing global environment for trade, finance, and technologies? How did that converge, and how does that impact on your business?
First of all, I want to thank Eddie and your colleagues at HKMA for giving me the opportunity to share with a lot of friends in the audience. And also an honor for me to share the same stage with my good friends Laura and Victor. You're not just good friends, but you're mentors to me. So, to your question, before I get into AI, I want to talk about trade a little bit, because one of Alibaba's businesses, besides our cloud computing and AI business, is a e-commerce marketplace. We actually run a global marketplace. And I want to echo Victor in his remarks that the global supply chain is actually fragmenting. And it is, if you look at what's happening from the macro standpoint, China is about 30% of global manufacturing value add. So when you think about shifting some of the component assembly and things like that to Vietnam and other countries, what's happening is you're reallocating the manufacturing value add to some of the other countries. Now, is that terrible for China? I think in the short run, it definitely hurts Chinese exports. But I think in the long run, it actually helps some of these developing economies grow. Because China's history is it grew as a manufacturing powerhouse, and that's why today it has 400 million middle-class consumers that are buying stuff from around the world. And you look at countries like Vietnam, Indonesia, what's going to happen is as they move up the value chain, their populations are going to become wealthier, and they're going to be able to buy stuff from around the world, including from Chinese exporters. So I think there is a circular effect that's going to be beneficial ultimately for China. Now, having said that, I don't believe that the Chinese manufacturing base it's being eroded, but I don't think it'll wholesale move out of China. Just the sheer size of the labor force in China, even though with a declining population, the Chinese labor force is becoming more and more productive with automation and AI and highly educated, very industrious labor force. You can't find a place with 800 million people who are in the labor force that's ready and willing to work very, very hard. So it's very hard. The other thing is a lot of the upstream supply chain is still in China. So you can't just move one factory. You have to move like 40 factories around it. I recently visited one of the factories. They sell direct online through Taobao, our e-commerce platform. And this factory, they make smartphone accessory stuff, like your glass screens on the smartphone. And it's an entrepreneur. He's only something like 35 years old. He started his factory. Now he's making 2 million screens every day.
Wow.
And so what he tells me is, when he decided to start his own factory, he sent through his chat group and say, I'm going to do this. And immediately within the same day, a lot of his friends came and said, oh, I can offer your sourcing of raw materials. I know a place to buy manufacturing equipment, all made in China. So the upstream supply chain is still in China. Yeah. So think of a country where you can just plop yourself down and say, I want to do a iPhone accessories factory, and then everybody comes around and say, I can supply this, I can give you manufacturing equipment, I can do it. No other country can do that. So the supply chain is quite deeply rooted in China still. So I think it's going to be a slow process of diversifying the supply chain.
Yeah, I think we heard this in previous panel about China plus one, and both Victor and Joe have already explained how that China plus one work. The key is China is still there. It's not, although we talk about reshoring, friendshoring, etc., I think it is very difficult to write China out of the equation. At some point, China will still be featuring in the manufacturing sector. But Victor, what does that mean, considering Hong Kong's strategic position have always been a center for international trade and finance? With this shifting landscape and reconfiguration of supply chain, where do you see Hong Kong should be positioning to go forward?
Okay, before I answer that question, I just like to build on something that Joe just mentioned on the supply chains. I think the movement is not really a hollowing out process. What we're really seeing is a downloading of the labor-intensive portion of the whole production process, as you were saying, Joe. And really, what is happening now is the supply chains within China itself are really trading up the supply chain to really focus on the upstream, and which is much more technology and capital intensive. So really, I see that as an economic specialization process. And that's actually, I think, very important to know. Now, the other point is, for the recipient countries, these developing economies, I think it's going to be a huge boost. Because many of these economies really need the opportunity to get into the global supply chains and to use their labor in a meaningful way, in a proper way, and to really then bootstrap themselves up the process. In fact, if you look back at the history of the Chinese economy's development, that's how China bootstrapped itself to the economy that you see today. So I think this actually is bringing in my mind, a new wave of globalization. Very, very far from the idea of decoupling, very far from the idea of deglobalization. In fact, it is a new wave of globalization. It is actually a different type of globalization.
I think, first of all, I agree with you. It's really not deglobalization, perhaps it's reglobalization, or even when people talk about regionalization, there has to be connectivities. And I think one of the beneficiaries of de-risking from China, as some of the commentators have said, it really is the global south. You know, we talk about ASEAN, which is an important part of the ecosystem and also the beneficiary of moving supply chain, part of the supply chain from China. But also, if we look at South America, Mexico, also a beneficiary of what we have been termed de-risking. But let me turn a little bit to Alibaba, to Joe. Joe, your IPO, Alibaba's IPO on the New York Stock Exchange in 2014 was the largest in the history of the United States stock market at the time. And I'm pleased to say that Alibaba has recently also changed its secondary listing in Hong Kong to primary listing. Perhaps you can share with us your consideration behind that, and how do you see Hong Kong continue in that journey to attract more company to be on the primary listing side?
Yeah. First, our journey, we were listed on the New York Stock Exchange in 2014. And then during COVID, it was 2020, we came to Hong Kong and did a secondary listing. Just recently, as you mentioned, last couple of months, we switched that secondary listing to a primary listing. And the main advantage of having a primary listing in Hong Kong is that you get access to mainland investors through the Stock Connect program. This is an excellent program where mainland investors can basically invest their RMB and they come in and buy Alibaba stock, and their money stays in the system, so it's a closed loop system.
Right.
So, which means when they sell, they still have to ship the RMB back to their back to China. But it actually opens up our ability to attract our mainland investors. And guess what? 90+% of our business is in the mainland. So we have our customers and users who are familiar with our products, but not familiar with our stock. Now they can access investing on our stock. And just within a couple of months of us attaining this primary listing status through the Stock Connect program, about 4% of our public float now are owned by mainland investors. But guess what? 15% of trading volume is from these mainland investors. So almost 4x of trading volume than their shareholding. So they bring a lot of liquidity into us, and that's one of the great benefits of having being listed on the Hong Kong Stock Exchange, being able to tap into the global investor base, but then also getting access to mainland investors.
I think that's a very important feature for companies that are listed elsewhere in the world and other markets, come to Hong Kong originally as a secondary listing and then change to a primary listing. A year ago, the mainland authority also allowed primary listed foreign companies in Hong Kong. In other words, you do not have to be like Alibaba or any of the red chips, but the foreign companies coming to Hong Kong and list as a primary listing, you can also enter into the Connect program and therefore access the huge number of retail investors in China and thereby increase your liquidity. Victor, over to you.
Well, Laura, let me get on to your question about the world that we have just described. What does this mean for Hong Kong? I think first and foremost, Hong Kong has always had the tradition of intermediating trade, right, in the region and to and from the mainland and so on. What is happening as the global manufacturing process disperses? Okay, Hong Kong is really doing the role of what I would call control tower in terms of moving the production around. And that is absolutely an essential role. That's really real economy stuff. And you know, also this flow is not like just one thing flowing to another and then it's static. In fact, what we're really seeing is this movement of manufacturing around the different countries and so on around the world will flow back and forth based on the geopolitical environment. When that environment changes, that's going to move. You know, now I think the main flow is actually from the mainland to Southeast Asia. But I think from there, people will be flowing further into South Asia, into the Middle East, to Africa, etc. But at the same time, because what you mentioned earlier, the French shoring and things like that, we're seeing jumping to what we call, nearshoring, and basically markets that could serve the two big markets of US and Europe. So Mexico is benefiting tremendously as a jump. And then I think in Europe, Turkey would be the nearshoring market because you can truck into Europe from there. If the geopolitics change, this will also shift, and as capacity usage changes, things will also shift. So Hong Kong's role as a control tower, first and foremost, I think is crucial. The second point, I think, is really thinking of some of the needs of Hong Kong, of the people going out, and using Hong Kong as the base. I think the first wave of movement actually will be primarily by the medium-sized enterprises from China. And they don't know these, developing economies, and Hong Kong really can be a guide to actually help them with that movement. That's going to be a big movement. From there, I think there will be movement of middle-sized companies from around Asia, and then in the long run, I think we have to keep an eye on India and its medium-sized companies moving around. So I think the idea of Hong Kong as a place where you can actually use as a hub, as a launching pad, I think is going to be our second role. And then the final thing I would say, Laura, is one of the biggest pain points as these medium-sized enterprises, move around the world with their production, financing is going to be key. And I would start with trade finance, because that's certainly one part of the overall package that's crucial. And that's probably the easiest for the financial sector to get into, because if a small factory sells to Walmart and you buy that receivable or secure against that receivable, I think it's pretty good. So you can start there, and then that'll go from there to loans to equity, etc. And I think Hong Kong has a real role to play as the financing of that. And also that's really merging Hong Kong's two great strengths, the supply chain center concept and also the IFC. And in fact, I would come back to the message that I know many people have given, and that is, how do we strengthen Hong Kong's position as an IFC? And I think what is happening with this movement as we merge these two, there'll be two things. One is the IFC will be anchored a lot more in the real economy and true flow of goods and economic activity. And the second is, I can see Hong Kong playing a role as a major trade finance center, which is something that will actually be very necessary to fill the very large and increasing trade finance gap in the world, which the ADB has actually did a major study last year to say it's $2.5 trillion today and increasing.
Thank you, Victor. I think the small, medium enterprises are really the backbone of many markets, China included, and then Hong Kong itself, and all of Southeast Asia in particular. In recent years, in the last 2 years, since COVID, we have heard a lot of the financing need of SMEs in the region. And that is certainly something that can be further developed in Hong Kong. we have often emphasized on the public market side of Hong Kong's aspect as an international financial center. But as you say, trade finance is an important aspect as well. Joe, if I could turn to you about shifting to AI. I know that Alibaba has you've recently said that Alibaba is AI and beyond, and everything is on AI a lot. So Alibaba not only develops, but operate a really rapidly growing cloud and AI business. Can you share some of this with us?
Yeah. I would like to say first that AI and cloud are like hand in glove. There's a symbiotic relationship between the two. And that's because when people use AI, whether it's training large language models or applications in the industry we call inference, you have to use computing power. And this is the reason why Microsoft invested in OpenAI. Because they want to grow their cloud computing business. They were somewhat behind AWS, and then they decided that AI was going to be the main driver of their cloud business. And then just think about it. Someone mentioned today that 200 million users of ChatGPT. Every time someone puts in a query into ChatGPT, it's thinking, the brain is thinking behind it, the computing is running, and it's running on Microsoft cloud infrastructure, and they generate revenue from doing that. So that's the logic, and we run both. We have both. We are the largest cloud company in China by far in terms of share and also technology, and that's because we invested 15 years ago in cloud technology out of our own necessity, because we were seeing an explosion of data and digitization of data coming into our e-commerce business, and that's why we invested in the basic fundamentals of cloud. And so, so with AI, we also run our large language model, which that's why I say it's hand in glove, because anybody that uses the Alibaba large language model will need to have compute, storage, networking, security, and all of that runs on our cloud. And we have already open sourced a 72 billion parameter large language model, so anybody can have access to that. We have an open source architecture. Yep.
I think everybody can see that AI is an area where China and the US will be competing. And it doesn't matter who is more advanced. I think, right now, China is trying to catch up, but I think there's great potential. And here in Hong Kong, we continue to play the connecting role, and we hope to be playing the financing aspect, right? But as we look at the next decade, what is the prospect? If we started out the conversation about decoupling, globalization, and so on. What do you think each one of you would think about the prospect of decoupling in general? Is the word going to go out of fashion soon?
I guess prospect of decoupling is kind of an oxymoron. Prospect is positive, decoupling I think is inherently negative, a negative trend, because it makes things a lot more inefficient. But where I see, from my vantage point, decoupling is felt most acute in the semiconductor area, because the United States government has decided to restrict the export of high-end chips. But not only the chips, final product itself, NVIDIA chips, but also manufacturing technology and lithography technology. And these are, manufacturing technology is, the leading example is TSMC, and the Dutch make the lithography equipment, and that's even subject to restriction, and the restriction is against China. So now you are forcing a decoupling of Chinese, forcing the Chinese to self-develop their semiconductor manufacturing. Now, I don't see any light at the end of the tunnel, so I think the trend is going to continue to decouple in the next, let's say, 4 or 5 years. But beyond that, people are going to all of a sudden realize, wait, this is kind of silly. Now, for 2 reasons. Number one, in the area of AI, it is so expensive and time-consuming to develop AI technology. And you're seeing American companies pouring in massive amounts. We're talking about $100 billion worth of data centers. John talked about that. The question is, how are you ever going to make that money back? And there's it can't be that this is not a sustainable situation. So I think countries will have to work together. Between US and China, they'll have to work together to develop some kind of AI. And the second thing is, the second reason I see some kind of convergence is the world is not just about US and China. Yeah. There are a lot of other countries in the world. I was talking to the AI minister at the UAE. They're developing their own version of AI. And they all need to get access to somebody's technology at some point, and they're not going to choose. They're not going to choose, I'm using American or Chinese. They're going to do both. And that'll give an opportunity for both countries to further develop their technology. So I think over time, people will just say, this is kind of silly. Let's get rid of the barriers. Let's converge. Yeah. Otherwise, it's too costly.
Yeah. Laura, I certainly agree with Joe. When you're talking about the, cutting edge development of AI and at the top, but I'd like to offer a slightly different viewpoint on what's really happening on the ground. If you think about it, without AI and all this technology, I think the linkage of the manufacturing with the consumer will never have happened the way it did. So in a sense, if you look at the working level, the practical on-the-ground level, this technology has actually brought people together as opposed to decoupling. In fact, I would say the technology, AI especially, has enabled a stronger coupling. Now you link the factories and markets together, in split seconds. And then the other thing I would say is, if you look at the major issue that all of us are thinking about in our daily lives, sustainability. Yeah. Without the technology, without the, all the things like blockchains, et cetera, without AI, I think we would never be able to tackle the issue, which is what we're tackling, which is really looking at the whole area of traceability to actually do something about the sustainability issue. And going to our tier 2, tier 3, and tier 4 suppliers to be able to trace the whole journey of a product all the way from the farm to the consumer. And that, I think, is the ultimate long-term solution to actually controlling the sustainability in the world.
I think that's very well said. I think, on everybody's agenda, all the corporate agenda, sustainability is here and is getting even more prominent. This morning, the Vice Premier talked about, the high level of opening up, a high quality productivity, and where Hong Kong can fit in, and where Hong Kong can fill the needs of China, of the country's demand, and at the same time for the country to lean on Hong Kong on the international financial center aspect. I think we will all agree that, Hong Kong will continue to have a role to play, whether in re-globalization, fragmentation. Our role as a super connector is important. I think technology will play a big part. The SAR government is catching up on that area. But I think overall, I would say we are hopeful that decoupling may not, in the sense, will not last. It continue to happen. We have to deal with it. We face it. But hopefully, it will not last very long. With that, can we give a big hand to our two panelists?